Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Ricky Kemler. Our next guest is the incredibly talented writer and host behind the How Stuff Works podcast, which has been downloaded over 1 billion times and counting. And now Josh Clark is back with a new and maybe more important podcast, The End of the World, which probes the many ways in which humanity could be destroyed or destroy itself. It's a fascinating exploration of the topic, covering it from a variety of unexpected angles, and you can see him talk about it tonight at the Bell House in Brooklyn. But for now, please welcome Josh Clark. Let's hear it.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for coming on. Thank you for doing this podcast, because I think so often, so many of us talk about the end of humanity. It's on our minds.
Right.
We're very concerned about climate change. We're very concerned about AI. And hearing the title of your podcast, I thought that I would immediately be hearing about climate change in the first episode.
Right.
But you start the whole show from a sort of perspective looking at the Earth from the universe and really bring into question how much we matter, why we matter.
Right.
How did you get to that place to start it there? Because that is not the obvious place to start this conversation.
Well, I did that. I kind of focused the first episode on what's called the Fermi paradox, which is this idea that the universe is way big enough and way old enough for life to have evolved trillions of times over. And yet we seem to be the only life in the entire universe. And not just from like us looking out into the universe and seeing nothing looking back at us, but nothing has come and contacted us. So that's the basis of the Fermi paradox. And if you really start to think about that, that says something really surprising, which is humanity's super special, I guess, is a way to put it, which kind of runs counter to what science has been doing the last few centuries, which is kind of chiseling away at the idea that we are special. Like, we used to think that Earth was the center of the universe, and then science came along and said, no, that's not right. And then we moved to the sun, and then we found out that wasn't right. And then, okay, the Milky Way. We'll say the Milky Way is the center of the universe. And then we found out that, no, the Milky Way is not so special either. And then on top of that, there isn't even a center of the universe to begin with. So we're this really insignificant, non-special species on a very insignificant planet in an insignificant galaxy. But now if we're finding out that we're the only intelligent life in the universe, that tells us the opposite of that we are totally special. So I wanted to lay that out to kind of raise the stakes, because the point of the podcast, The End of the World, is about the existential risks that are coming our way, the threats that can actually wipe out humanity forever. And we're not used to these kinds of risks. So to kind of set the mindset, to set the tone, I wanted to say, if humanity goes extinct, it's a really big deal, not just to us, but intelligent life in the universe may be snuffed out in the bargain as well.
Right, to sort of take away the idea that we always say that, well, we are just like a cracked egg. We are not a big part of this equation.
Right.
You were saying we kind of may be the biggest part of this
We
equation.
may be the equation, actually, weirdly enough, which is it's hard for me to accept as well. And there's tons of philosophical implications to that. But even setting all that aside, if I can get the listener to agree, okay, wow, we may be the only intelligent life in the universe, that makes us kind of important, maybe that will cause them to value our life and the survival of humanity a little more. Because that's the whole thing. I meant the podcast to be very interesting. It has a great score by the composer Point Lobo. It has great sound design by a guy named Kevin Senzaki. And if you listen to it on headphones, it's really, really neat. But the point of it is that this is real. This is quite serious. There are threats coming our way that are new, that we're not used to, that could wipe out humanity. And so the point of the entire series is to get you to understand this, and then at the end, get you to care, to do something about it, to take action.
Now, I don't want to go through it episode by episode, but the second episode is fascinating. I'd never heard of this before. I think it's called The Great Filter. Can you explain that concept? I mean, in less than 43, 44 minutes?
I can give it a try, actually. So the Great Filter is this hypothesis by a physicist turned economist named Robin Hanson. And Dr. Hanson figured out that the idea that we are it in the universe tells us something really weird. It says that either we're the most special life, that we're just a total, completely unique and special life, and nothing has ever passed to the point that we've gotten to, which would suggest that this great filter, this thing that keeps all life from growing and spreading throughout the universe, we may have passed it. And so that's great, because that means that the hardest steps are in our past and the whole universe is laid out for our use ahead of us, right? or it means that there has been other life before, and that it's died out. And it died out before it was able to spread off of Earth, which tells us that since we're about to spread off of Earth, that's pretty much the next step in our technological evolution, that we might run into that hardest step, that great filter that has killed off all other life. And if that's the case, we should pay attention. The reason that I inserted the great filter as basically its own episode, is because it plays such an important part in existential risks. Because if it seems that the great filter is in our future, it appears to be coming in the form of these existential risks that are coming our way, which is ironically some of the very technology that we're developing today. We may accidentally wipe ourselves out.
In what way?
Well, there's several ways. Probably the biggest threat from, according to existential risk researchers, like people who are actually in this field and thinking about this stuff, is artificial intelligence. That seemed to be the one that everyone I polled said, yeah, that's the biggest threat. And we tend to think of
biggest threat because they become learning computers.
Basically, yeah. I think also it's the biggest threat because we are expanding by such leaps and bounds in the field of artificial intelligence research. But the problem is
such a loser. I can't help but quote Terminator when people talk about AI in this regard.
So don't worry about Arnold Schwarzenegger's character. What we need to be worried about is the Skynet, the actual AI that was controlling him, right? Yeah. So there was like a kernel of like truth to, or prediction, I guess, to
It's not
Terminator.
when Schwarzenegger comes back. It's those brief flashes of the machine stepping on skulls in the future.
Exactly. That's what we need to worry about, not Schwarzenegger, right? So
no, he was a good by two. He was a good guy. Sorry,
he was,
yeah.
He kind of turned a corner, didn't he? AI won't do that, right? We have to. That's the key. We have to program friendliness, is what it's called, into AI. Friendliness is not just going to emerge from a machine becoming super intelligent. The problem is all of the components to make a machine super intelligent are on the table right now. They just haven't quite fitted themselves together in the right way. But friendliness, figuring out how to make those machines friendly to humans, we're light years behind where we are in developing the super intelligent machines.
And one could also argue that so much of what makes our system, our global economic system, move forward at the rate that it does has very little to do with friendliness, and that if you are programming robots to operate within the system and to be beneficial for the corporations or the companies that are purchasing and making these robots and programming them, they would very likely not program a consciousness maybe, but not a conscience.
Right, precisely.
It wouldn't be economically beneficial for them.
Not just would it not be economically beneficial, but no one knows how to do that yet. Like the idea of instilling morality into a machine, we don't even know how to define morality for ourselves, right? So turning that into ones and zeros, that is not something we've cracked yet. And friendliness, I want to make clear, it doesn't mean like the machine tucks you in at night or make sure you have like warm milk or something, although that would be pretty great if we had machines that did that in the future. It means while it's doing what it's designed to do, while it's pursuing its goals is what it's called, it takes into account human needs, human desires, our desire to survive, to flourish, to thrive. And then it makes its decisions toward its goal, taking those things into account. An unfriendly AI is any artificial intelligence that doesn't have friendliness programmed into it. And it's not like there's anything personal to it. It's just pursuing its own goals. It's just doing what it was designed to do. In exactly the same way when we bulldoze over an anthill, when we're developing a new strip mall, we don't really think about the ants. And even if we do think about the ants, they lose out to our goal. That would be the same situation, except in this scenario, we're the ants, and the AI is the human developer.
Like when hedge funds send letters to their shareholders that say, we see no immediate economic gain in pursuing a sort of a climate change, a role in climate change.
Right. Yeah, so that is another problem with it, too, that there doesn't seem to be, like you would make way more money just deploying artificial intelligence today like we are without any thought to friendliness than you would saying, well, hold on, let's put this development on hold for a little bit until we make sure we don't threaten the future of humanity. Unfortunately, that's not the mentality that's taking hold right now, which puts all of us in a very dangerous place.
But that mentality that's not taking hold with AI, that is a mentality that is I mean, AI in this conversation is kind of just a microcosm for how that mentality exists in a macro way globally.
Sure. Yeah, and it's not just AI. That's that's a really good point. There are people who are making decisions. This is the problem with artificial intelligence, or with our existential risks. I'm sorry. People can make decisions regarding existential risks, whether it's artificial intelligence or nanotechnology or some risky biotech experiments that affect everybody.
Nanotechnology, is that like the chips? What's nanotechnology?
So those are, nanotechnology involves robots, very, very tiny robots on the order of like a billionth of a meter in size. And they will probably benefit us tremendously in the future. Like they'll be crawling around our bodies, fixing our cells and our DNA and making sure like we keep living really healthy, nice lives for a very long time.
I'm opposed to that.
Are you? Well, so that's the thing. Like I've run into a lot of people who have said, I don't really like this vision of the future, and I totally get that. I don't like all the visions of the future either. I think some of it feels icky and weird and odd. But
I'm opposed to living forever, and I'm opposed to this fear of mortality that I think that we have as a culture. You know,
Right.
I know even if people are living healthier, I don't know if the planet is meant for that many human beings
Right.
to be living at once.
Well, the answer that I've run across to that one is, well, if we, once we shed our bodies and become what's called post-biological, we won't have to worry about population or anything like that. We can just keep growing and growing because we'll all be in digital form and we won't be taking up space any longer, which is kind of cool.
But we'll all be like Brain from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, just like in a jar of water and like somehow punching into a phone.
So we won't even have the jar of water.
Don't laugh at me.
We won't even have the jar of water. We would just be straight up digital intelligences, right? The idea behind that is that if our consciousness, if like the experience all of us are having in this room right now, like our minds, our lives, is just our neurons firing, right? And like that's what creates consciousness. If that's the case, then if we can digitally reproduce that consciousness, or if we can digitally reproduce neurons, we can reproduce that consciousness, right? So in a digital format, no bodies, no anything like that, just strictly a digital format of a mind, of a consciousness, and we'd be able to experience consciousness or life or live in really amazing ways. We'd be able to edit ourselves to feel profound joy and bliss, like on scales that we're not capable of now. These are some of the visions of the future. And again, I think they're possible. I don't necessarily want them all for myself. But this is the point about existential risks, and this is something that I've run into myself, is this idea of, well, who am I to decide that future humans who do want that are denied that possibility? And that's the role that those of us alive today are playing. Not necessarily that we want to live forever, but that we have the chance to give the human species the ability to do amazing things in the future. But it's if we get things right now. If we just keep doing what we're doing now, we're toast. Humans aren't going to be around in probably about 200 years. That seems to be the reality of it.
Two things. I want to backtrack and ask a dumb question about the bodies that exist, or the minds that exist without bodies and are just sort of living digitally.
Right.
How does reproduction happen?
You can make copies. You could actually create entirely new consciousnesses by arranging different neurons together.
So at that point, every consciousness living or existing would have to have some means with which you could decide to make that. It wouldn't be the same as
getting together.
Yeah, as two
and
people, no matter what their economic means are, being able to get together and have a child and repopulate the earth. If you are sort of solely existing as a aspect of consciousness digitally, that then becomes a kind of like a decision that you or whoever is in control of whatever a society is at that point decide.
Sure. It might even be a personal thing too. Like, well, I think what you're saying is you don't need two people any longer, which would be revolutionary and different.
It's no longer based on desire. It's no longer based on bodily function.
It wouldn't be based on bodily function. It could be based on desire. I mean, like if we still have a drive to have like a kid that you want to raise, another human that you want to create and raise, that might be an instinctual desire that is still there in post-biological form. It's just you don't go reproduce with somebody else and have a kid and hope for the best. You say, oh, I want this kid like this, and I'm going to raise him like this. So you could arrange it. I think you've really tapped into something that that a lot of people find icky, in that this seems to predict a very lonely, isolated existence in the future. And I think that's what I find a little bit icky about it too, about this idea of going post-biological, that you don't need anybody else. If I want to go live in basically paradise on Earth, I can go do that by myself. And do I really need other people to experience bliss? No, I can just turn up my bliss dial a little bit, and who cares about other people? If I want to create a new human, I don't need another person. I don't need to negotiate life with somebody else to raise another kid or another human being. And it does kind of describe this really lonely, isolated, compartmentalized existence that I think we have trouble imagining it now. But I think that it would, if we do go that route, if we go that way, humans of the future will find what they need, whether it's companionship, whether it's other people. We'll get what we need. And I think that's the point, is we'll have at our disposal more of what we need or more of what we want than we possibly do now, because we'll have taken control of our fate and decided for ourselves what we want. And that is what we are gifting to the humans of the future by navigating safely to this point in the near future, where we've invented basically all of the technology that can keep us safe and deliver stuff like that to us.
That's the utopian view of it. The glib view of it that I would throw at you is that we can't even take control of our own fate because of Twitter right now. Imagine when we have that much technology at our disposal.
That's a big concern about the near term with artificial intelligence, that it will be able to psychologically manipulate us very easily through things like social media and stuff like that. And we're showing that that is definitely the case right now. We're proving that. Yeah, there's a lot of problems and issues that we have today. And I hope that in taking on existential risks, that's such a decision, a project, a global project, that we all have to decide, we're going to do this. It's such an inherent statement about the value of life that I feel like it could actually be a turning point for humans, where we go from warlike and competitive to compassionate and caring about not just other humans, but life on Earth, all life on Earth. It's a real opportunity to change as a species. And I think, without even consciously deciding to change, I think it could be a happy byproduct of taking on existential risks. Kind of like getting to the moon was for the United States. It was a national project that we all took on. We all wanted to get there, and we did, and we felt amazing about it afterwards. Imagine if the entire human race came together and decided we were going to navigate through the most dangerous period in human history. And we were going to do it, by God, and we took it on, and we made it through. I can't imagine that wouldn't have lasting, amazing impacts on humanity.
One could also agree that the space race had a warlike sense of duty as well, though. Mm-hmm. At least implications in regards to the space race with Russia.
Right.
One of the things that you said, humans will not be around in 200 years if we don't face our existential problems right now. If we are around in 200 years, the innovation that we could see is almost limitless, what we could do with technology. Why do you think we are still developing all of these technologies that could change and could be better for humans in 200 years, but not innovating ways to take care of ourselves right now and to make sure that we are not boiling in hot water in 20 years?
Right. That's a big part of taking on existential risks. We may find that it requires us to make sacrifices for the humans of the future. And there's two ways that the people who think about existential risks address this. One way is that there's going to be a lot more humans in the future. So there's
a lot more humans now.
Right. But we're talking, so there's like 7.5 billion people running around on Earth right now, which is by far the most that ever have. I think it's about twice the amount that there were in like the 1940s, right? There's a lot of people. But we're talking just over a billion-year period. If we didn't progress much more than we are now technologically, and we just hung around here on Earth and managed to stay alive for a billion years, there'd be something like 10 quadrillion humans in the future, like 1,000,000 trillion humans. So a trillion? 1,000,000 trillion humans in the future to come. So the actions we take now can allow those people to be born. So that's one reason to take sacrifices. Another reason is that those future humans, if we do this right, will have amazing lives ahead of them, thanks to us. Lives that just eclipse those that we're experiencing today. That's not to demean or diminish the value of the lives of people today.
I was going to say, you say that to people, even just about their grandchildren or their great-grandchildren.
Right.
You know, what about the quality of life for your great-grandchild? And you oftentimes hear, what am I going to do?
Right.
You know, you hear that nihilism, that complacency, that nihilism that we were talking about in the green room.
Yeah, my wife and I have lots of conversations about this, because I've worked on this for 18 months, basically. And she knows about as much about this as I do. And something she brought up is, like, at what point in the generations of descendants that we have, when do they become, like, kind of faceless? When do we stop caring about them? You know, is it like great-grandchildren, great-great-grandchildren? Because really, it's all the same. Like, these are still, like, our descendants. And I found that when you start looking at humanity as, like, part of you, an extension of you, like, that's our species, they stop becoming faceless and they start becoming more important. And it doesn't seem necessarily like a sacrifice to maybe curtail some of the AI development today until we figure out friendliness, to make sure that 1,000,000 trillion humans can be born and have amazing lives, because those are humans. I'm related to them in some way. And when you start thinking like that, especially when you can start thinking in the deep time that existential risks requires you to think about, or to think in, it just becomes a little clearer. And as it becomes clear, it becomes more morally important, it seems like.
Before I let you go, you know, I think you've already said this, but there's so much to take in from the podcast. I recommend everybody go listen to it. It's really incredible work.
Thank you.
But what is the thing that you hope people most take away from it?
I hope people care. I hope people hear the series and they come out of it caring. And a lot of people have. I've gotten a lot of emails from people who've said, this is amazing. I'm totally bought in. What can I do? And what I've found, the one thing that the average person can do, and the whole reason why I made the series to begin with, is to just start talking about it. Because this stuff actually is real. It's backed up by science. Like, there really are existential threats coming our way that could wipe out humanity. And if we start talking about it, they will become obvious and normal, and people will start to take action. In exactly the same way that animal rights seemed bizarre 50 years ago, or the idea that we were stewards of the environment seemed really weird 50 years ago. 50 years from now, hopefully, we will be taking existential risks as seriously, and we'll have come together as a species to take them on.
Josh, it's been wonderful talking to you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
The show, the podcast you can find on iTunes, right?
Yeah, you can find it everywhere you find podcasts. I'm also on social. I started a conversation at #EOTW Josh Clark. And then my other podcast, Stuff You Should Know, you can find everywhere too.
Josh Clark, everybody, let's hear it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.